Okay. And certainly, I think what has increased is everyone's awareness of bullying and how serious it is and how it can lead to truancy, how it can lead to children not if they're not at school, they are not learning, they're not graduating, and they're not really progressing through their school experience the way we expect. We know what the impacts are in their own families, because now we're talking about it more, and we know what the impacts are in every institution of our city. So that's very important. We know the impacts of social media are rapid. They're widespread. A message that you might have whispered to a schoolmate, now you can tell to 300 people within a split second. So we understand that if we don't do something and have real measures in place, that we can really see harm done to many children in the District of Columbia. So that's what's critically important. Let me turn now to Councilmember Catania, who has been so helpful and effective in making sure that we have public health facilities in our schools, and that network of facilities, I think, will be helpful in helping us combat bullying as well. Mr. Catania.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony. The issue of bullying is a subset issue of a larger problem that is pervasive in our schools. There is an atmosphere of violence that permeates our schools. What's interesting to me, the intersection between violence and truancy, and how that this whole subject relates to our city and how we develop. There were a good many scholars who believe that poverty would breed violence. And that was a school of thought for a long time, that, if people were poor, it often acted or would cause them to act out in ways that are violent. But the latest school of thought is actually counter that. It's that violence actually breeds poverty. And this is an illustration of how it happens. Violence breeds poverty if you fear for your personal safety in school, and you therefore do not educate yourself or are not in a place where you can be educated. And so with so many of our young people in places where they don't feel safe, and it goes beyond bullying. This is an important subset, but it is pervasive through the school. If people, for whatever reason, whether they fall in one of the protected categories of this legislation or not, do not feel safe, they do not go to school. And we have some of the most embarrassing truancy statistics in the country, and we have the poverty to show for it, because people have simply opted out of school, not because they don't want to learn, but because they actually fear for their personal safety. And so, I look at this as a very important step, but it has to be more, obviously, and I know the chairman knows this and the authors of this legislation know, it has to be more than this. There was some reference to the Youth Risk Behavioral Survey from 2009, and it does provide us some good information, but we don't have, and we won't have, the information from 2010 because there were problems associated with the gathering of the information. Now, I really believe that if we are going to tackle the subject of violence, if we are going to really tackle the subject of behavioral health among young people, that the time has come for a comprehensive epidemiological survey of what are the issues afflicting our young people. And it has to be more than a passive survey, although I don't mean to diminish the hard work that goes into it. It must go deeper than a survey, and we must understand exactly what are the issues and items afflicting our young people, so we can develop evidence-based approaches to help reduce these chronic issues. There's a companion piece of legislation moving its way through the council that's been co-authored by many members called the South Capitol Street Tragedy Memorial Act. And it does hope to, among other things, call for a citywide evidence-based epidemiological survey of our young people, so we can find out once and for all what is beating away behind so many of these issues. And the legislation calls for a number of a number of, I think, long overdue remedies, the one of which is expanding certain behavioral health evaluations among young people, especially in the pre-K through our Healthy Futures program, looking at school readiness at K through 3, looking at DC START, and I know we have representatives from INTIMIDATION and DCPS who can talk about them. But there's also a program that gets very little attention that I believe has been successful called Second Step. that generally attempts to reduce aggressive behavior in schools. And so as we formulate our budgets, and I will summarize, Madam Chair, as we formulate our budget, our budgets really do reflect our best hopes for the future. And, at times we budget based on what we know or what might be politically popular. But what is necessary is that we start budgeting, for these items to address these behavioral health issues and do more than talk. And I think we have an enormous capacity to do good in our city and a willingness to do good. But where the rubber meets the road is within our schools. And these truancy statistics, in no small part, are driven by violence. I want to thank each of the witnesses, and I'd like to ask perhaps any one of the witnesses if they can suggest an existing evidence-based bullying program that might help inform the committee more perfectly understand the issue about, where is the safe space to report? Is it an administrator? Is it the nurse professional? Is it the teacher? Is there a practice in another jurisdiction of designating a particular teacher or a particular administrator? Just organizationally, how it might work and how that might inform this legislation going forward. And I would ask any one of the panelists if they'd like to respond.
Sure, I'll respond. As far as reporting, it's usually a lot of times individual employees, staff members form a comfortable relationship with students, and therefore there should be provisions in place that allow any staff member who receives a report of bullying and harassment to tell that they'll be required to tell the administrator or the principal, so that all the reports are aggregated in one place. As far as I've seen most commonly in other jurisdictions is the principal or the principal's designee is the person responsible for collecting the incidents of bullying and harassment and continuing the reporting up the chain.
Are there particular programs, Ms. Gill, that you would recommend? Particular states, particular jurisdictions, or off-the-shelf programs that we might take a look at?
There are a number of programs. I would have to do some research and get back to you about particular ones we recommend. I know that Glisson does have anti-bullying programs that are specific with regard to LGBT students and others, but there are many other programs that offer evidence-based solutions. So I would have to get back to you about that.
One thing, Madam Chairman, that might inform as we go forward is to look at what we were able to do with what was called the MC-RAP, the Master of Condom, the MC-RAP campaign, where we had the Committee on Health had a student initiative 2 years ago where we had a number of focus groups with young people on a whole host of issues involving youth sexual health, and we learned that they didn't like, for instance, receiving condoms from the school nurse because many of the nurses reminded them of senior female figures in their family, and there was a bit of discomfort there, or they feared the judgment and so on. And so the school system very creatively came up with the MC-RAP campaign, the Master of Condom campaign, and it permits the designation of other adults who participate in an online course or survey that hits the finer points of how one should counsel a young person in the subject, and of course incorporating certain issues related to maturity and so on. But it gives the adult it gives the system at least an understanding that these individuals who are dispensing condoms have had some formal training, even if not extensive. I wonder if that might be a program that we could look at here, to have an adult or several adults who are given additional training on the subject with how to deal and respond and the channels, and perhaps identify them in the schools. Might be an idea that we could replicate in this regard as well. And again, I don't mean to diminish the significance of this work. This bullying with respect to the subject groups here are obviously acute. I just want us to also keep an eye on the larger environment in which our young people are getting schooled, because I really believe this late evidence that talks about violence breeds poverty is really true, and we see it on full display right here in our city. Thank you.
Council member?
Mr. Saunders.
I do have a recommendation of a program. The title of the program is See a Bully, Stop a Bully, Make a Difference. This is a program which is done in conjunction with the American Promise Alliance National PTA, and the American Association of School Administrators. It's a program that we can provide some support through the American Federation of Teachers for, and it does address the issue of cyberbullying, LGBT students with disabilities, cyberbullying, English language learners, culture and religion, safe and supportive schools and programs, and other programs at work. And so that might be a starting point, and it was carried off effectively in St. Louis in August and New York in October.
Thank you, that's helpful. And just one last thing before you leave. Oftentimes, there are lessons learned from the tragic situations that we've seen in other school districts. And I think it would be helpful if you have that information available. Certainly, I'm going to ask my staff to investigate. But after actions that took place in some of those situations may inform what we can put in place proactively. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to note that also the arts can contribute to this. One of our own city's playwrights, Alan Sharp, wrote a play a year or two ago in response to some of the teens' suicides in other jurisdictions. A very powerful drama that actually might be useful to have performed in schools around the city, because it really brings things to life and really demonstrates what the problem is in a way that I think would make a lot of the kids sort of perk up and recognize what the pattern is. Part of the problem is finding ways to get the bulk of the students that are not the direct trouble causers to socialize in a way and to have the teachers and staff members interact with them in a way that encourages them to form a sort of a social group that pushes back against the bullying. So it's not just there's the whole thing about snitching. You have to empower the students.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you all for your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you.